Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're dialing in from. Regardless, I appreciate you joining me today as we discuss and as we continue along with our See, Measure, Automate series. We're going to be covering more of the measure piece of things today as we look into ConnectAll Insights Analytics and as we learn a little bit about what it is, how it works, and in the case of this narrative, how it's going to help Carl out of his pickle. So let's go ahead and bounce on over to my screen. And so as I mentioned before, this is session number 2, and we're going to be focusing specifically on the measure piece of See, Measure, Automate. So if you missed the last weekly tech webinar on September 3rd, that is available on demand. And it walks you through how Carl was able to use the value stream designer and how Carl was able to work with ConnectAll, utilizing a value stream assessment to map out his end-to-end software delivery value stream. Then today, we're going to be focusing on measuring, seeing the data from Carl's value stream with Insights Analytics. And then in a couple weeks, at the beginning of October, we will be walking through how to utilize the application adapters in order to automate some of those manual processes. So let's go ahead and check back in with our friend Carl. Remember him? He's left with a couple of pretty tall orders. There's a lot going on internally. The CEO and a number of folks on the leadership team are getting a little angry with what's going on in IT. And so they've tasked Carl with trying to figure out how to fix it. There's a lot of high priority features and bugs that are getting bogged down in the development phase, and customers are not pleased. They're churning at a very high rate. And then on top of that, there's a very slow go to market with any of the new features that product marketing is trying to push. So Carl is having to face figuring out how to deliver software faster without reducing the quality and making sure that the highest priority items are getting out to market. On top of that, he also has to deal with a hiring freeze, and he also has to deal with budget cuts of 10%. That is due to the very high level of customer churn, so there's just not enough revenue for the organization to continue supporting all departments, including IT, in the same ways. So what's Carl going to do? He has to figure out how to increase speed and decrease cost in order to deliver that valuable software without impacting the quality. So we talked a little bit during the last session about how Carl started to understand the processes today as he mapped out his value stream from beginning to end. Now what we're going to walk Carl through is how we can start to assess why development is taking so long and kind of start to even touch on what some of those potential opportunities are for Carl to be able to start to deliver high priority software more effectively. And that's going to need to be done in a very data-driven way. He's not just going to be shooting from the hip. He's got to figure out the best way to do this based upon the data within his value stream. So for step number 2, after mapping out the value stream, we've got to help Carl measure the critical metrics. So now that he's got his value stream mapped out and he knows what it looks like from beginning to end, from a process standpoint, we've now got to figure out what to measure. So one of the ways that Carl continues to engage with ConnectAll is to identify the most important metrics based upon the GQM method. And that's goal, question, metrics. Now, GQM is something that's been around in the industry for a while. And so with ConnectAll, Carl begins to walk his value stream architect through the goals of the organization. So we have to figure out what are those outcomes that Carl is after. What is important for the business in order to continue driving things forward? Well, during our conversation with Carl, he mentioned that improving the customer experience is a big piece of it. So we noticed that there's a lot of that customer churn. We noticed that the customers, when they are reaching out with their NPS ratings, they're giving very low scores. And so why could that be? What is needed from IT to be able to achieve that goal of improving the customer experience? And so we start to dig a little bit deeper into some of those questions. And Carl lets us know that the key thing that we need to figure out is how we can be faster, how we can give the customer what they need within a reasonable time frame, because we're really falling behind the 8 ball here. And not only are we not able to give them critical features that the competition is giving them, but on top of that, when a bug is identified, it's taking us way too long in order to fix it, causing a lot of frustration and causing a lot of those negative comments that we're seeing within our NPS framework. So Carl lets us know faster time to production. That is one of the major key things that we need to do in order to improve the customer experience. So then now we need to figure out, how do we measure that? How do we figure out if you are starting to get the faster time to production that will in turn lead to a better customer experience? Well, Carl and the ConnectAll value stream architects begin to brainstorm and try to figure out what are those key metrics. And so some of the suggestions we make to Carl are, well, have you considered being able to measure your lead time? How long it takes from when an incident or an incident is reported to the IT team all the way up till when it's released in production, so the customer starts to see the benefit of that. Now, what about throughput? Are you starting to get a little too much work in progress within your, value stream? Are things starting to build up? Are things starting to take a lot longer because there's just such a backlog? We also want to know variation. Are there lots of spikes? Are there lots of valleys? Are you having an inconsistent delivery process, perhaps due to that throughput? And then finally, how's your flow load? Where are some of these people, where are some of these people being able to address some of these things? How overburdened are they? So now that we've helped Carl figure out how he can start to measure in a way that will positively impact customer experience, we now need to be able to get the data. So how can Carl do that? Well, there's two sides that are required when it comes to being able to measure things. First of all, you need the input. You have to be able to gather the data and harvest the data from the different tools within the value stream. And so for that, we suggest that we leverage the Insights Adapter with Carl. So what you see here is kind of a taste of what the Insights Adapter does. It enables Carl to be able to harvest the data and harvest the information from multiple tools within his value stream. Any of the tools that we configure in order to be able to harvest that data can be added to the Insights Adapter, where it's then structured and organized within ConnectAll's common data model. Then based upon how it's structured and organized within those hierarchies, the output is then within the Insights Analytics dashboard. You'll be able to see both of these in action here in a second. And as we start to see the Insights Analytics dashboard, we'll be able to leverage some of those metrics that we identified for Carl. We'll be able to walk through how Carl can utilize those in order to be able to figure out where those opportunities are for potential improvement. So let's go ahead and exit this screen. And we'll walk back over here to the ConnectAll Value Stream Designer. So as Jonathan walked through last week, as we were talking with Carl and as we were mapping out his value stream, this is the output that we noticed. Now, one thing that stands out is that there's no single source of truth. There's no way for Carl to be able to measure any of the things that are going on within this value stream. So the next thing we suggest to Carl is, let's go ahead and add a grouping, and we will call this grouping Analytics. Now, as we start to think about this Analytics grouping, we need to be able to have that single source of truth for Carl to be able to bring that data into and harvest that data from the various applications. So let's go ahead and come over here, and we will bring the Insights Analytics adapter right here onto our value stream. So now we need to establish the connection between this Insights Analytics adapter and database and ConnectAll. So let's go ahead and click the plus sign, and we will add the existing connection, which is created successfully. And let's go ahead and do the same thing here with Azure DevOps as an example. We'll click the plus sign. We will take on the existing connection, which if we did not have one, we would be able to enter the credentials here just by adding a brand new connection. But as we add this existing connection, we will then create a link between Azure DevOps and Insights Analytics. And from here, we'll go ahead and name this link ADO and Analytics. Go ahead and hit this plus sign, and we will start to create that application link. So now that we're in here, we're able to dictate which of those projects we want Carl to be able to pull from. We could either leverage multiple projects, depending on the application, or in this case, we'll go ahead and just stick with the project that is most relevant to Carl. We want to take a look at the bugs because that's kind of the area that we started discussing as far as being able to start to deliver value to customers because they're getting a little frustrated that their bugs aren't being addressed fast enough. If we want to come back in here later and add data for features, we can certainly do that too. And we will then come over here and we'll take a look. We already have the information filled in here for Insights Analytics. So let's go ahead and let's actually change the table to Work Management. And we will come down here and configure the fields. Now, once we're on this screen, we would be able to map any of the individual fields that we think are critical and important for Carl to be able to measure. However, you also see that ConnectAll has gone ahead and actually mapped a lot of fields automatically. These are some of the critical fields that will help Carl be able to map the information that he wants. However, if we need to go back and we need to add certain fields for, as an example, stories or anything like that, we could certainly do that here. But let's just go ahead and roll with what we've already got. Go ahead and enable the application link, this V1, and save the mapping. So we see that we've created this link between Azure DevOps and Insights Analytics. So now as Carl and his team are starting to work within the flow of their everyday process, as bugs are being created and worked on within Insights Analytics, based upon whichever fields we wanted to map, that information is now being harvested from Azure DevOps into the Insights Analytics Common Data Model, and then it's being structured and released back into the dashboard for Insights Analytics that we've set up for Carl. And it's doing so in a way that will enable him to visualize that information and be able to make key decisions. Now, since we just set this up, Carl doesn't have any data. So let's go ahead and work with some example data just to show you how Carl could potentially use this, perhaps after a week or two of letting his team work. So let's go ahead over here. And as we take a look at this dashboard, there's a couple things we'll start with. So for this dashboard, this might be something that Carl's leaders are going to be very interested in. So we see that this is the executive view for leaders within Carl's organization. Now, based upon this, the leaders are able to see, how are we doing? They may not necessarily be as interested in the details, but they want to know, are we on track? Are we going to be able to release something that's going to make our customers happy or not? So as we take a look here, we see that this particular initiative is only at 30% completion. And as we drill down a little bit deeper, we're able to see within the hierarchy how our organization is doing with the epic level leading up to this initiative, the story level, and the test level. And now this is just an example of how the hierarchy could be set up. It could be set up based upon teams or really just any hierarchy level that you think the organization would be interested in. If you wanted to do this based on the OKRs, you're welcome to do that too. Now, as we take a look, Carl's leadership is able to see, okay, how are the financials looking? Are we on budget or are we starting to fall behind? And based upon this, Carl is starting to get a little pit in his stomach because he realizes we've almost spent our entire budget and we're only 30% of the way done with this critical initiative. Okay, so as we take a look, we can track the progress of objectives, but from Carl's perspective, he wants to see how can we improve the speed. And in order to do that, in order to be able to get to your destination, you got to figure out where you are today. That's why those "you are here" signs are so important at the mall. And it's always really frustrating when they don't have those. So as we take a look at this, Carl's able to notice that, we have a very long lead time. We're sitting at over 2 months in order to get something from the initial request or from the initial planning stage up into production. I can see why our customers are getting a little frustrated. As we take a look at the flow velocity, Carl is able to notice, okay, with our throughput, there are some of those spikes and valleys that we were afraid of. It's pretty inconsistent. And then as he takes a look at his flow distribution, he realizes, yikes, we are spending a lot of our time fixing bugs, doing support, and fixing incidents. And we're not really able to get to those things that will help make our product better because we're so focused on fixing what's broken. So now Carl decides, okay, as we take a look back at our hierarchy here, let's dig a little deeper. Let's figure out what is causing that long lead time. And so as Carl clicks this, he's able to go one step deeper. And Carl's able to notice, okay, within that one particular initiative, there's a lot of failed tests. Something is not working right in the testing phase. So that could be a prime opportunity for Carl to focus on when it comes to making things better. With all of these failed tests, perhaps there's a lot of back and forth. Perhaps the developers are not getting the information they need in real time. Perhaps there's just a lot of rinse and refresh and a lot of things occurring that are preventing this from getting ahead. So now Carl can then go over to a different dashboard, perhaps one that's more relevant to him and his team. And as we start to look at some of these initial DevOps metrics that are going to be relevant to him as a DevOps or as an Agile manager, he starts to get some more details. As he takes a look at his last 2 weeks of throughput, you're able to see on a 2-week basis that, okay, there are some spikes, there are some valleys, and then, variation is very high. So as we think about the throughput variation, anything over 0.3 is going to be poor. And we're looking at double that. So Carl asks himself, why? I know that there's so many failed tests, but what's going on there? And as we take a look here at some of the bottlenecks, and as we take a look here at the flow load, we notice that what seems to be going on is where things are getting stuck. It seems to be in that configure stage and that test stage. But to a lesser degree, there are a lot of delays that are blocking what Carl is able to do. So as we take a look at each of these individual stages, and as we dig into some of these bottlenecks, and as we continue to dig into some of the metrics that are important to Carl, what we start to notice is, okay, there are a lot of opportunities for Carl to be able to improve. And when it comes time for Carl to improve, we're going to want to return back here to our value stream dashboard and perhaps go back over here to the value stream itself. And we're going to want to assess where can the process be better. And as we take a look at those results, we start to see, okay, configuration and testing could be great places for us to start. So what we'll be able to get into during our next weekly tech demo is how Carl can take that information that he now has, that information that he's been able to harvest from his value stream, and how he can start to put that in action, utilizing ConnectAll's adapters, being able to improve on some of those manual processes that are not only causing the process to take a lot longer, and that are not only dragging out that lead time, but that are also in turn probably decreasing quality. If there's a lot of those manual processes, there's probably a lot of things being missed, which is likely leading to a lot of those failed tests. So thank you so much for your time today. I'll go ahead and leave the bridge open for another minute or so. And if there are any questions that you have or any sorts of things that you want me to review or any top of mind thoughts, please feel free to add those to the Q&A and I'll be able to answer those accordingly. I'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Not seeing any questions coming in right now. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and shut things down. So thank you again for spending your time with me this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're calling in from. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope that this webinar has helped kind of serve as that second bridge between the value stream assessment as well as getting into how you can automate. Now, one last thing I just want to let you know about. When we talked about at the start of this, the GQM assessment, the goal, question, metric assessment, with that, if you're interested, you're welcome to reach out to ConnectAll in order to get one of those. Please just feel free to reach out to our team. You can do so at sales@connectall.com, and we would be happy to set you up with one of those complimentary GQM assessments, as well as a value stream assessment if you're interested in one of those from earlier. I do see that there's one question that has been added. Somebody has asked, is a replay available? Yes, so this webinar is being recorded right now, and in probably about a couple hours or so, there will be a replay available on demand. So go ahead and keep an eye out for that. It should be available for sure by the end of the day. So you will be able to either review this webinar yourself, or you can send it over to someone that you think might get use out of listening to some of this content. So again, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you joining me on this Friday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to being able to help you be able to gather metrics from your value stream. Thanks and have a great day.